No sé, bien. Bueno, perdón por los problemas técnicos.
Sí.
Bueno, we'll do it in English, no?
Yeah, let's do that.
How are you, Iglika?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Fine. Very hot in here. Boiling hot.
In Kiev now. Wow.
Sorry?
You're in Kiev now.
I'm in Warsaw.
In Warsaw. All right.
Yes, 33 degrees or something like that. Yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know in Bulgaria it's around this temperature, but in Western Europe it isn't.
It's crazy. Is it always like that in the summer?
No, not at all.
No?
No.
So it's this year. Well, anyways, let's talk about what you know best, languages.
Sure, with pleasure.
I don't know if you had something to present or...
Yes, I'll share my screen.
You can share, right?
Yes, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, now you should be able to see it.
Yes.
I'll do it as a slideshow. Okay, here we go. Learning languages. Some tips by me. And here's my channel, Monoglossia. So if you don't know it, you're welcome to have a look at it. In it, I talk about languages in several different ways. One way is I post my actual language lessons that I take online. So of course you'll find my Spanish lessons with Virginia there, and some extracts with group lessons, and also some other languages, sometimes just language discussions based on something, the impressions from a book or a translation exercise or challenge. And also something we do, I have this channel with my husband, so he also participates, even though he's quite busy at work. We also show demo lessons, so one single lesson for various world languages. And we try to focus on rare languages in a way, so languages that no longer have native speakers, or that are whose native speakers are diminishing in number, or languages that people tend to confuse with other languages.
So interesting.
Okay, here we go. The way I have organized this is looking at the common problems that one faces when learning languages. And with each problem, I will seek to provide solutions.
Good, amazing.
Okay, a quick disclaimer. So I'll try to be as general as I can, as in I'm not going to focus on particular weaknesses like having trouble remembering vocabulary or pronunciation problems, for instance. But of course, if anyone has specific questions, they're more than welcome to ask them, and we'll try to answer them. So sometimes I can't really relate to how language learners feel, because obviously it's everyone's personal journey. The languages themselves may be different. And I have an anecdote here that fits the road metaphor. I remember going on school trips. I would feel sick during the trips. And once my teacher said, I discovered something. I also feel sick when I travel. So the best thing to do is close your eyes. And I closed my eyes and it got worse. So very often when you make a discovery, something that really works, it really works just for you. So really my first tip would be, see what works best for you. Will it be like writing down new words, or making memory cards, or talking to people? It's kind of specific to the person.
So true.
Okay, so lack of motivation. That's always the starting point, because you can't even start learning a language unless you have the necessary motivation. First of all, I say enjoy the process, and I cannot really relate if you don't, because I so enjoy it. And I understand there are circumstances in which it can be hard to enjoy the learning process. For example, you just need to be learning a language for your job, or you need to take a language course in order to finish your university term, for instance. But really, there is always things you like related to a language. Especially if you stretch it to the culture and like watch a film or try a dish, there is always something that can grab your interest. And also, I would say, see language learning as an intrinsic goal rather than the means to achieve something. It may be the means to achieve something, but I think you have to forget this for the time being while having the lesson and enjoy it. Even if later you use it for work, for travel, just take your time and imagine yourself in this moment. You're learning the language, you're trying to do the exercise you're doing in this moment, because otherwise it will just be an endless process and you will not be able to focus unless you really live in the moment in the process of learning. And also I'll add, you have to define your motives. Some people have said to me things like, I want to be a polyglot, what do I do? And it is just so vague, wanting to be a polyglot. So I would ask them, what languages interest you and why? And the reason doesn't have to be anything profound. It could just be, I like the sound of this language, or I want to visit this country. But still, it is a reason that keeps you going. And it's also good to be able to measure your progress in a tangible way. Like have some milestones, like I want to be able to watch this film without subtitles, or I want to pass an exam. I often do that. I take certificate exams whenever I can, if I'm advanced enough in a particular language. Okay, moving on to a lack of time. Of course, a very common problem for all of us. And one thing I'll say that's very encouraging is spending time on learning the language regularly is more important than spending a lot of time on it. I think whoever has done any sort of sport can relate to that. Just keeping fit really requires just a couple of exercises a day rather than completely forgetting about it and then trying to make up for the time you have lost. And another way to save time is to do things you would otherwise do, but in this language. For example, all of us take our time to relax, to listen to music, to watch a film, and we can just do it in our target language. Or reading a book, of course, also, especially if it's in the original language, it's very rewarding. And for example, the way I proceeded with Italian not long ago, I wanted to be exposed to more Italian, but to do that, I didn't just buy a grammar book, for example, or just take Italian grammar lessons, but I joined a course that talks about different Italian dialects. So Italian was the means for me to learn something else. I wanted this information and I was hearing it in Italian. This was just a bonus for me.
So good.
And something a bit challenging, that may not always be possible, is if you're really into languages, try to make it part of your job. So I think all of us can teach, as all of us have our native languages and people are interested in them no matter what they are. It would be a misconception to say I speak not so common language, so people wouldn't be interested. For example, on the channel Monoglossia, I didn't think I would focus a lot on Bulgarian, which is my native language, but people were interested. So now I'm making content in Bulgarian too. And whatever your main job is, sometimes there are ways to add language to it in some way. For example, I work as a full-time translator, and even though the translation is just between English and Bulgarian, I have access to all translations in all other languages. So I can look at them and compare. And then, of course, there are jobs that are very narrowly linked to languages, like being a translator. So, of course, if someone feels inspired to do that, it would help develop the language. It wouldn't be just using it. It would also be learning more and more of it. And even communicating with clients, communicating with colleagues, or even getting into some kind of routine. Like during my lunch break, I will always take 5 minutes to look at some Japanese vocabulary or something. It's again a part of your job in your mind. Okay, another serious problem is the lack of finances. And first of all these free materials that we have access to today, I wish we had them back in the days when I was a teenager. I think I would be learning languages so much more. There is YouTube, obviously, but there are all these applications on the phones. I'm not even very familiar with them. It's younger people like my son that would be more familiar with those, but there's really tons of them. There's big competition if you want to make one. Then another obvious thing, a little bit more old-fashioned, would be to visit a library. It's so obvious, but we often don't even think about it. We just pass the library, we forget that it exists. But there's so many resources, much more than we can find at home, even if it's a very tiny local library. Like where I am in the French province, I have been surprised by how many things I can find in local libraries. Then making compromises, for example, not having a fast food meal that you have been planning to have, but using the money to take a language lesson instead. It may be good for the health as well, and just knowing that you did that makes you appreciate the lesson and know that you really put all you could into it. Okay, moving on to lack of imagination. And I really want to focus on this one. I think that's my secret weapon. And if ever there was my method, like the Iglika method of learning languages, it would have to do with imagination, I think. Because it's just crazy how we don't tend to see ourselves in other people's shoes. And this can be strictly in terms of language, or it can become broader and spread into just culture and not being able to function freely outside of your little comfort zone. For instance, I remember I was taking Russian lessons in France, and I was surprised that my French classmates' expectations of Russian, they thought it had to be similar to French. For example, the counting system. I guess many people know counting in French is extremely specific. Like to say 70, you have to say 60, 10, 70. To say 80, you have to say 240.
Wow.
Like 420, sorry, 80. To say 90, 90, which is 420, 10. So my French classmates were learning with me the Russian numbers, and they expected that to say 70 in Russian, they would have to say something like 60, 10. She said 10. And the teacher was shocked. It was like, what is that? And she explained that it was just 70, that it went naturally 20, 30, and so on. And they seemed so confused. They kind of couldn't get why this would work as logic. So sometimes we forget that this is just something we are used to, but this is not the only way to express something. Like objectively, 70 is not 60-10, and that's all there is about it. That's the only way we can make sense of it. And I think this shows also how sometimes we feel in unfamiliar cultural context. For example, my best friend from Bulgaria once visited me in France, and she wanted to cook a Bulgarian meal, and she was looking for cheese. The regular Bulgarian cheese called sirene, which is a white cheese, a bit like Greek feta cheese. And she went to the supermarket and she was angry. She was like, where is the regular cheese? And they just couldn't get it. What do you mean the regular cheese? All of these are regular French cheeses. And I remember explaining to her that it was anything but regular cheese here. So yeah, I think it's very important to see things in a different way, to leave your comfort zone, which very often means traveling, of course. Mm-hmm. Like, of course, you experience this right now, so I guess you can tell that it's not the same, just having your routine and doing something completely different.
Actually, I came here to a country that I don't speak the language at all. I mean, I studied Polish for a year only on an app, on Duolingo, but the app. So I recognize words, but I cannot, make a phrase, really understand. So I really left my comfort zone right now, like 100%. And I also feel like very isolated because I came to an area where there are no tourists, where there are no expats. So I'm really with the locals. So in that case, you're like, what do I do next? I don't know if to enroll in a course or like how do you start integrating, into the community? Because otherwise it's very, I don't know, shocking impact, yes. No?
I imagine though that people in Poland will be very happy if you say even a couple of words in their language. We kind of do that in Eastern Europe.
Yes, I try. I know 3 to 4 words. I mean, greetings, but that's it. I mean, and then they reply in Polish, and that's when the conversation stops because. But I understand the what you're saying, which is very good. It helps you when you leave your comfort zone to see how the world can be different, no? And how absolutely. I came from Italy, that is so different to here, and then it's like different worlds within the same. I mean, it's not so far away if you think about it geographically, no? So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We have this a lot in Eastern Europe. When I'm in Bulgaria, I really make sure I travel because distances are so short, but in 2 hours I'm in Greece, which is a completely different language experience.
Yes. And what's your advice, like for someone in my situation? Or for example, I had a friend also 2 months ago. She moved to France and she had the same feeling that I'm going through now. Like she couldn't communicate. She felt like isolated, like she couldn't talk to people. And she left. So I don't want because of that. I want to reach a point that like, what do I do next? What would you suggest in something? I don't know if you've been in a situation like this.
Well, I can't think of a situation being in a foreign country and not being able to get by in English or in Russian at worst. I think maybe going to Georgia was the weirdest one where English didn't work very well, but then Russian did. And my Russian is not that good, but I could get by at least, go shopping or ask some questions. Yeah, I think maybe should try to not completely get involved in people's daily lives, like going to an open market or something, but maybe post in a language group. Like I know there is this in Bulgaria, group for foreigners and friends, it is called. So sometimes people would post, I'm in Bulgaria, does anyone want to hang out and exchange languages?
Yes, but you end up speaking English, so you don't learn anything. Maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, you can kind of maybe you can say, yeah, I would like to learn more. Who is up to being patient with my limited skills and talk a bit, have a cup of coffee together,
Like
have a cultural exchange.
Yeah, like a language exchange. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Huh? I'll try it. I'll let you know next time.
And finally, I've written act, and that's something I really do. Since I was a kid, I find myself imagining that I am in a film or in a music video, and it still affects my life to this day. When I am learning a language, I imagine like I'm in a film. For example, I'm learning Spanish, and I'm in this Spanish film, and I'm a Spanish actress, and I'm speaking Spanish. And I don't know, it just gives great satisfaction. And I think it doesn't matter even how advanced you are in a language, there's a part of you that's this particular thing, that's Spanish or Japanese or whatever, that kind of resurfaces when you start speaking the language.
That's a fun tip. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. Then lack of confidence. It can come in several different ways. The first one is the confidence of, I'll never learn this language, just starting with this frame of mind. And it has to do with having motivation, with spending enough time on it. But just many people focus on how long will it take me to start speaking rather than actually starting. Like this can be seen in language groups, like on Facebook, on Reddit. How many months do you think I will need in order to start having conversations or reading a book? And my advice will be, really don't calculate time, don't have doubts that you'll start speaking it, because it actually pays off pretty easily. When you get into a language and you're motivated, just in a couple of months, I think you can see a lot of progress. You can understand things, you can watch videos, and that's when satisfaction comes.
That's true.
Then another type of lack of confidence is when you compare yourself to others too much. Like, well, how this person is speaking, I will never be able to speak like that. And I guess it's natural to compare ourselves, but of course, everyone is in a different situation. Like, this other person doesn't have the same language goals, or maybe doesn't speak the same languages, doesn't have the same daily life, maybe at work or at home. We all have our particular circumstances, and there's not two that are the same. So I would say, just redirect this energy of feeling bad about yourself and feel inspired when you see someone doing a great job. I had the pleasure of interviewing American polyglot Luke Ranieri, who speaks, I think, 20 languages. He's amazing. He speaks Latin and ancient Greek like a native speaker. He just stands there having whole conversations, discussing like archaic texts. And wow, it just feels like, wow, that's amazing. It's great to see that your brain can take that. So maybe one day I can speak more languages too. And it feels great.
That happens a lot in group courses. They all start comparing themselves. I mean, it happens a lot. That there's the strongest student and the weakest, and they feel intimidated sometimes, so they don't want to.
Right.
That has happened to me as a teacher a lot. Like they face kind of situations.
Yes.
But
it may happen more.
Yeah,
it just doesn't show. I guess I would keep it to myself. If I felt bad, I would try not to show it. But then, I guess it's natural.
Exactly, but nobody know. I tell them, like, you don't know if this person speaks Spanish at home. Maybe the partner speaks Spanish. Like, you don't know how like never compare yourself, as just what you,
Mhm.
yeah, and have fun. Like even if you make mistakes, laugh, you know, it's
Yes, exactly. Which leads me to the next one, particularly the fear of speaking. I think it really deserves a point by itself
yes.
because, yeah, it's speaking that kind of feels like really puts into practice what you have learned. And it's a bit unfair because sometimes you know so much more than you can show through speaking. And I'll be the first person who is not a strong speaker. Like when I have taken language certificate exams, including the Spanish DELE B2 several years ago. So everything else, reading comprehension, writing, I was close to the maximum, like perfect score. Speaking, like something completely different. If everything had been like the speaking, I wouldn't have passed. It's the other grades that brought it up. So I think it can be overcome. There are different ways, just talking and talking, making content for me also, speaking in my videos because it's a medium in which you mainly speak, has helped me boost my confidence. Also, of course, talking to native speakers. And I don't think people should be afraid that they will not understand their position.
Exactly.
Because, of course, maybe there are people like that, but it's rare. I think native speakers understand that it's difficult.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And this is a good point because I think there's still a very traditional way of learning. Like I feel my students are very comfortable with the book, with the exercises, even my online courses. Yes, they enroll. And then when there's the conversation group, nobody shows up. And I'm like, but guys, this is like the best opportunity to practice what you've been doing. And so I think that some of them have told me that they feel comfortable in a group because they kind of hide in the group. They don't feel so exposed to speak. Yes, like in the traditional class with other students. But when you know, give them the chance to really speak, maybe, you know, one-to-one or in front of others, then they vanish, they disappear. So it's I think it's also, it has to do with, yeah, the confidence and, you know, like this feeling, we grown-ups, we don't want to feel like little children because when you speak another language, you speak like a child, no? Like
Yeah, that's well said.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Strange, you know, to feel like you cannot say something as a grown-up. So but it's, I think it's focusing, it's all about focusing on like being born again into a new, you know, like new world, a new culture, and enjoy that process instead of focusing on like, oh, I still cannot say a word, you know, like we tend to think. Yeah.
Yes. And even before you're able to speak, that goes for children as well. You get to understand so much. And sometimes native speakers in various languages cannot appreciate this. But if someone who is speaking your language understands you, but then can't reply, that means he understood everything you said, which means they really have some knowledge.
It's a lot. Yes. Yes.
So yes, being a teacher and being a learner at the same time is very important, which you're a great example of because you know what it's like learning languages as well as teaching.
Exactly. I try to all the time put myself in the position of the student, and that improves my teaching too. Like, I mean, in with this trip that I'm doing now, that I went for first, I went to Italy. That I feel very confident in Italian. But then I noticed my weaknesses, like following instructions and some things. So I said, you know what, maybe I can include these kind of things in my lessons because it might help travel. Because, you know, the textbook, the book doesn't teach you a lot of things that then you actually that you need, or I don't know, taking a taxi, buying a ticket for the transport, and all those things are usually not in the book. So I said, I'm gonna, this is helping me a lot to see how I can improve the teaching too, my teaching.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, great. I think a lot of schools in lots of different countries are moving from the traditional kind of, the way they call it, grammar translation method, just a lot of grammar, and then being able to translate from the native language to the one you're learning. And they're kind of moving from this to lots of speaking, lots of real situations. I know in Japan they have this. I had the pleasure of teaching Japanese people in an online school like that. And they were just so excited about it. They had been learning English for years in their schools, but they hadn't got anything out of it. And now they had the chance to communicate with people from other places, to ask the questions they had. And yeah, just the fact that it was in English was just like a bonus for them. It wasn't even the main thing about it.
Exactly. Yes. Nice. Interesting. Okay. Lack of a... Yes.
Yes, something I want to note, because I personally love grammar, but I know many learners don't. Just grammar is great. It's not there to make your life harder. It's there because it serves a purpose just as much as vocabulary knowledge does. It's a system that helps you give out clear meaning. And of course, every language has its misunderstandings from there, its jokes, just the way it deals with the problems of communication, because there always are some. And just to try to change people's mind about grammar being boring, I'll note a couple of interesting grammar points in different languages, starting with my language, Bulgarian. So Bulgarian has very flexible word order. So you can literally say the rat ate the mouse in this order, meaning that the mouse ate the rat. So it would be mostly a question of stress. So it is the rat that the mouse ate.
I think in Russian is the same. No, I'm struggling with that. Yeah.
Yes, very similar, yes. And we have different ways to deal with it, though. In Russian, there is no definite article. In Bulgarian, there is, but it's a rare type. It's postfixed. It's after the word. So it would be puachut. Puach is rat, but puachut is the rat. And then in this particular case with masculine nouns, the article would be different depending on whether the rat is the subject. So just by using correct Bulgarian, the correct article, you can tell this meaning too. Who performed the action? Actually, who ate?
Wow, that sounds fun.
Then I'll mention Greek, which is a language I'm really a beginner in, maybe the one that's my weakest at this point. And I have found it fascinating to see that even names can change.
Wow.
Like you put an article before names, like I met the John or something. And also the name can change depending on whether it's subject or object, for only for masculine names. For example, a Greek name like Kostas, it will be Kostas is doing something, but then I am calling Costa. Literally the name changes. So it really makes you rethink your starting point. Even your name can change.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I was like, wow.
But that's only with personal names, with people's names, no?
Yes, and it has to be male names, and they would have to be also Greek names and having the particular ending. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Just randomly removing letters wouldn't work. Then Japanese, there's so many things I can say about Japanese because it's the language I speak that's from a completely different language family. So I'll just mention a small fact is that there is no future tense. Wow. There is the past and the present, and that's all. So I will do something. Sorry?
They don't think about the future.
Yeah, there are different ways to interpret it. Or is it that they're so reliable that when they say they'll do something, it's as if they've already done it. Like, they're always on time. They always keep their promises. So there's no reason to say I'll do it. It's as if I'm doing it already.
Interesting.
And something beautiful from Spanish, again, just an example, there are other beautiful things about Spanish too, is the ser or estar. Which one of the two? It's a big question for speakers of other languages because it's really quite unique. And I think it's beautiful. For example, you can be acting silly in the moment rather than being silly. It kind of focuses on the fact that you can change and you can be understanding with the way other people are behaving or being. You can understand that's what you're seeing, but not necessarily how the person is all the time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and I think, yeah, finally, lack of communication. And language is communication per se. There is no going around it. Even if you're the biggest of introverts, you're bound to communicate with the language. Even reading a book is communicating with the person who wrote the book and through the means of this language. And they're communicating a message to you. So some tips to communicate for me would be to talk to people. And the obvious one is talking in the language you're studying, but even talking about your learning progress helps materialize it. Like, I learned this word and it's a beautiful word. It's a bit different from my language. Or talking about it, or also blogging about it is one option. Again, it makes it out there in the world rather than something you just saw somewhere or read somewhere. And finally, talking to a teacher. I think it's extremely important. And always when I have made progress, I have had a teacher by my side, like really keeping track of my progress, knowing exactly where I started, with what rate I'm going. And there are alternatives like language exchange partner, or with the difference would be just maybe one of finances. In terms of language exchange, the person is teaching you, but you're also teaching the person and saving money in this way.
Exactly.
So yeah, for learning Spanish, I can even recommend a teacher. Virginia is amazing. She has a great method, lots of communication, and you can see her methods on her channel, on my channel.
Thank you. It's really difficult to find. We were discussing this with another Spanish teacher. She's also trying to learn Russian and other languages, and we were discussing this, like the difficulty of finding a teacher that you feel, I don't know, like it's like finding the hairdresser, the one who really understands your needs. It's so difficult. And
yeah.
It's not only, I mean, a good teacher can prepare the most amazing class, but then also needs to adapt to the needs of that moment, that specific class that maybe at that time you're blocked, you cannot speak. So, they need to be, it cannot be fixed like the book, like a structure that we need to follow these steps. So it has to be flexible, because I think that it's communication. Everyone is in different moods every day. And you don't need to, I stopped working for language schools because I didn't like the way that we had to rush into the book to complete the book, because they bought the book, so students need to complete the book. I said, no, this is definitely not for me. I mean, it's not the way they should learn. There are different needs every day, every week, and yeah, it's difficult, but the right teacher is out there for
Yes, absolutely. Okay, and I guess that's the end of my presentation. Any questions are welcome in the live chat or in the comment box after the video. We'll be going back to look at them.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Iglika. You're a great inspiration. I always tell my students about you. Like, look, she knows she speaks so many languages. And that's why I wanted you to share these so that, they get these tips. And not to feel frustrated, and enjoy the journey, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you
so much fun.
so much for today. Thank you. And
thank you too.
yeah, I think I'll stop this, and it stops.